People from Jackson and Memphis gathered in downtown Jackson for justice of the murder of Tyeasha Starks. Today marks 2 months since Tyeasha's murder, and 2 days since Tennessee legislation moved forward to protect gun firms.
It's a trap for our children. It's a trap for our people to keep going to the grave sites.
Exactly. Right.
Black Lives Matter activist who goes by the name of Mama D believes this gun reform is a straight path to more graves. Proposal of lowering the legal age to carry to 18 years old also received disapproval.
18-year-olds carrying guns. I remember when I was 18, I probably didn't need a gun.
I came to pick up my son. According to witnesses, those were among the last words 22-year-old Tyeasha Kataria Starks spoke, before what was supposed to be a routine custody exchange became one of the most closely debated homicide cases in West Tennessee.
This Memphis activist believes Tennessee legislation is only making it easier to access guns, despite other protests still happening at the Capitol.
And y'all got to remember, the most dangerous gun is a legal gun.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not the stolen gun. We hear about that gun killing somebody every now and then.
Within minutes, a quiet neighborhood had become an active crime scene. One family would spend the years that followed searching for answers. Another would stand by its account of what happened. Detectives faced the difficult task of determining where the truth lay between two sharply different versions of the same event. At first, the facts appeared straightforward. Everyone agreed on why Tyeasha had traveled there. They agreed on where the encounter took place and who.
Lawmakers are expected to finish a legislative session as early as this week. 39 News will continue to update you as more gatherings are held to demand justice for Tyeasha Starks and for gun control change. Sanaya Carrizales, 39 News, downtown Jackson.
Was present. But once investigators began comparing witness statements with physical evidence, phone records, and forensic findings, the similarities quickly ended. One family's account ultimately aligned with the conclusions reached by investigators. The other continues to insist that the full truth has never been told. That divide has kept this case in the public conversation long after the investigation officially concluded. For investigators, the challenge was never simply determining that a young mother had lost her life that evening. Their task was to reconstruct a chain of decisions made over the course of only a few minutes and determine exactly what happened during what should have been an ordinary custody exchange. Years later, one question still remains. How could several people witness the same encounter, yet leave with accounts that differed so dramatically? Viewer discretion is advised. This documentary examines a real homicide case involving family conflict, loss, and an investigation that continues to generate public discussion. While we avoid graphic descriptions, some viewers may find the subject matter upsetting. If you're new to this channel, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and let us know where you're watching from. To everyone who has supported this channel through your subscriptions, comments, likes, and shares, thank you. Your support allows us to continue producing carefully researched, fact-based documentaries that keep victim stories in the public consciousness while encouraging thoughtful discussion. Now, to understand how an ordinary custody exchange became the center of one of West Tennessee's most controversial homicide investigations, we have to go back to where it all began. On the 20th of February 2023, 22-year-old Tyeasha Kataria Starks traveled from Clarksville to Jackson, Tennessee, expecting to pick up her 1-year-old son after an unexpected change to an informal custody arrangement with her former boyfriend, Bryce Curry. Instead, what was meant to be a routine custody exchange ended in a fatal confrontation outside the Curry family home, triggering an investigation that quickly drew public attention. Although law enforcement identified the person responsible for the shooting, no criminal charges had been announced at the time of the latest publicly available official updates. The case continues to draw attention because eyewitness accounts, statements from those involved, and the conclusions reached by investigators differ in significant ways. At the center of this documentary is one question: what exactly happened during those final moments? And do the available facts fully explain why events unfolded the way they did? To understand that question, we first need to understand who Tyeasha was. Born in May 2000, Tyeasha Kataria Starks was raised in Brownsville, Tennessee, by her parents, Tara Harris and Philip Starks. Family members describe her as determined from an early age. She grew up alongside her younger brother in a close-knit household where education, discipline, and supporting one another were central values. Those who knew Tyeasha remember her as outgoing, approachable, and someone who naturally brought energy into any room she entered. During her years at Haywood High School, she built a reputation as both a dedicated student and an active participant in school life. She was involved in cheerleading, gymnastics, softball, dance, the Beta Club, and the Spanish Club. Teachers and classmates remembered her as someone who successfully balanced academics with extracurricular activities while maintaining a positive attitude. When Tyeasha graduated with honors, those closest to her believed she was only beginning to realize her potential. She later enrolled at Austin Peay State University to study biology with the goal of becoming a dentist. She saw the profession as a way to build financial stability while helping others. At the same time, she became a certified pharmacy technician and launched her own eyelash business, demonstrating an entrepreneurial mindset while continuing her education. Friends described Tyeasha as dependable, supportive, and genuinely happy for the successes of others. Whether she was attending classes, working, growing her business, or spending time with family and friends, she remained focused on building the future she envisioned. That future took on an even greater purpose in January 2022 with the birth of her son, Tan Curry. According to her family, motherhood quickly became the center of her life. She organized her studies, work, and daily routine around raising him while continuing to pursue her education and career goals. Those closest to her say she was determined to provide every opportunity she could for her son without giving up on the dreams she had worked so hard to achieve. By all accounts, she remained committed to building a better future for both herself and her child. But over the next year, the relationship between Tyeasha and Tan's father would become increasingly complicated, setting the stage for the events that followed. After graduating from high school, Tyeasha Kataria Starks reconnected with Bryce Curry, someone she had known since their school years. What began as a friendship eventually developed into a romantic relationship. In 2021, the couple learned they were expecting a child. Although the pregnancy had not been planned, family members say both prepared for the responsibilities of becoming parents. Their son, Tan Curry, was born in January 2022. By then, however, the relationship between Tyeasha and Bryce had begun to change. The couple eventually separated, but despite the end of their relationship, they agreed to co-parent without seeking a formal custody order through the courts. Instead, they relied on an informal custody arrangement that allowed Tan to divide his time between both parents. At the time, Tyeasha was living in Clarksville while continuing her education and operating her eyelash business. Bryce remained in Jackson, Tennessee, where he lived with his parents, Tyeasha Curry and Chelsea Curry. With the two cities roughly 2 hours apart, every custody exchange required careful planning, consistent communication, and a significant amount of travel. Family members say the arrangement worked well for a time, but as the months passed, disagreements over parenting responsibilities and scheduling became increasingly common. There is no public evidence that either parent had initiated formal custody proceedings before February 2023. Instead, the success of their co-parenting arrangement depended almost entirely on communication and cooperation between both households. As detectives later pieced together the events leading to the shooting, several other individuals emerged as key figures in understanding what happened. Tyeasha's parents, Tara Harris and Philip Starks, became outspoken advocates for their daughter. Two women publicly identified as Ariana and Nadia were present during the final custody exchange and later shared their accounts of what they witnessed. Detectives with the Madison County Sheriff's Office examined the available evidence before presenting their findings to District Attorney Jody Pickens for legal review. The case also drew attention from community advocates, including Karen Spencer McGee and Cassio Montes, while reporting by journalist Brianna Hordman helped bring the investigation to a wider audience. Together, these individuals would shape the public's understanding of one of West Tennessee's most closely watched homicide investigations. By early 2023, communication between Tyeasha and Bryce had become more important than ever. Without a court-ordered custody schedule, even minor changes required both parents to reach an agreement. Statements later shared by family members and witnesses suggest that the informal system had begun to show signs of strain. Neither parent could have known that a single change to their routine would soon set in motion the events that followed. By February 2023, the informal co-parenting arrangement between Tyeasha Kataria Starks and Bryce Curry depended almost entirely on communication. Without a court-ordered custody schedule, even minor changes to pickup times or childcare responsibilities had to be worked out directly between them. In the days leading up to February 20, that arrangement was beginning to show signs of strain. On the morning of Monday, the 20th of February 2023, Tyeasha followed what had become a familiar routine. She drove from Clarksville to Jackson and dropped off one-year-old Tan Curry with Bryce before returning to Clarksville, where she planned to continue her normal schedule, including attending classes. Just a few hours later, those plans changed. Publicly reported accounts indicate that Bryce contacted Tyeasha by phone and text, explaining that he would be unable to care for Tan the following day because of his college schedule. He asked whether she could return sooner than originally planned or make another arrangement for their son. The request quickly led to a disagreement. From Tyeasha's family's perspective, the original schedule had already been agreed upon and should have remained in place. Bryce, however, maintained that his academic commitments required a change. At the heart of the conversation was one simple question: who would care for Tan over the next 24 hours? There is no public evidence that either parent sought assistance from law enforcement or the courts before meeting later that day. Instead, the disagreement remained a private matter between two parents trying to resolve an unexpected scheduling conflict. Eventually, a decision was made. Tyeasha would make the 2-hour drive back to Jackson to pick up her son. Based on the available information, neither side appears to have anticipated that what was intended to be another routine custody exchange would soon become the focus of one of West Tennessee's most closely followed homicide investigations. Late that afternoon, Tyeasha arrived at the residence on Harpeth Drive in North Madison County, where Bryce lived with members of his family. Also present were two women later publicly identified as Ariana and Nadia. Their observations would later become an important part of both the investigation and the public conversation surrounding the case. What happened over the next several minutes remains the most disputed part of this investigation. There is broad agreement on only a handful of facts. Tyeasha arrived at the residence. A confrontation followed. The encounter unfolded outside the home. Law enforcement was called, and emergency responders were dispatched shortly afterward. Beyond those points, however, the accounts begin to differ. The Madison County Sheriff's Office reported that deputies responded to a shooting at approximately 6:30 p.m. Investigators later stated that the incident began as a disturbance related to a child custody disagreement. In a public investigative summary, the Sheriff's Office said witnesses interviewed during the investigation reported that Tyeasha was holding and activating a stun device during the confrontation before a resident of the home fired the fatal shot. Officials also confirmed that the identity of that resident was not publicly released because no criminal charges had been filed at that stage of the investigation. Tyeasha's family, along with the eyewitnesses who accompanied her to the residence, publicly challenged key parts of that account. They have consistently maintained that the events unfolded differently and have continued to call for further review of the evidence. Those competing versions quickly became the defining issue in the case, fueling widespread debate and leaving many people questioning exactly what happened during those final moments. Emergency medical personnel arrived after deputies secured the scene, but Tyeasha was pronounced dead at the location. Her young son was not physically injured. Because the shooting occurred during a custody exchange involving a minor, the Madison County Sheriff's Office also notified the Tennessee Department of Children's Services to conduct the appropriate child welfare follow-up. As daylight faded over Harpeth Drive, what had begun as an unexpected change to a parenting schedule had become a homicide investigation. Detectives now faced the difficult task of reconstructing a rapidly unfolding sequence of events using witness interviews, electronic communications, physical evidence, and forensic findings. Determining exactly what happened during those final minutes would become the central challenge of the investigation and the question that continues to shape public discussion of the case today. When deputies from the Madison County Sheriff's Office arrived on Harpeth Drive, their first priority was securing the scene and separating everyone who had been present during the confrontation. In a matter of minutes, what had begun as a custody exchange became an active homicide investigation. Every person at the residence represented a potential witness, and every statement would need to be measured against the available evidence before investigators could determine what had happened. Detectives began by carefully documenting the scene. Photographs were taken. Evidence markers were placed. The positions of vehicles and other relevant items were recorded to preserve the scene as accurately as possible. The goal was not only to document where the confrontation occurred, but also to determine whether the physical evidence supported the various accounts given by those who were present. Investigators then turned their attention to the witnesses. Among those interviewed were members of the Curry family, along with Ariana and Nadia, the two women who had accompanied Tyeasha to the residence. Each person was interviewed separately. By comparing individual statements, detectives worked to establish an independent timeline while identifying where accounts aligned and where they conflicted. Those differences would become one of the most closely examined aspects of the investigation. Detectives also reviewed electronic evidence connected to the events of that day. Phone records surrounding the custody exchange helped investigators verify when communication occurred and compare that timeline with witness statements. The objective was to build a chronology supported by documented evidence rather than relying solely on memory. Officials have never released the complete contents of those communications, and nothing made public indicates that the records contradicted the established sequence of calls leading up to the meeting. Investigators also collected and processed the firearm involved in the shooting. Standard forensic procedures included documenting the weapon, preserving it for laboratory examination, and determining whether the available physical evidence was consistent with the witness accounts. Authorities have not publicly released detailed ballistic findings, nor have they indicated that DNA or fingerprint evidence became a disputed issue in the case. The investigation also included a post-mortem examination conducted by the medical examiner. While the complete autopsy report has never been released publicly, the examination formed an important part of the evidence reviewed during the investigation. Medical examiners routinely determine the cause and manner of death, document injuries, and evaluate how those findings fit alongside other evidence collected during the investigation. Over the weeks that followed, detectives continued reviewing witness interviews, examining physical evidence, comparing timelines, and consulting with prosecutors as the investigation progressed. Throughout that process, investigators emphasized that their conclusions would be based on the totality of the evidence rather than on any single witness account. By the end of the forensic review, detectives had assembled a detailed chronological reconstruction of the incident. Even so, one challenge remained. The available evidence could explain many aspects of what happened, but understanding the decisions made during those final moments depended on weighing conflicting accounts against the physical evidence. That challenge would ultimately shape every decision that followed. The next stage of the case would determine whether the available evidence met the legal standard required for criminal prosecution. By the time detectives completed their investigation, they had answered many of the questions surrounding the shooting. But one issue remained unresolved. The people who witnessed the confrontation did not all describe it the same way. That difference would become the defining feature of the entire case. After reviewing witness interviews, physical evidence, electronic records, and forensic findings, investigators concluded that the confrontation began during a child custody dispute. In a public investigative summary, the Madison County Sheriff's Office stated that the available evidence supported witness accounts indicating Tyeasha Kataria Starks was holding and activating a stun device during the confrontation before a resident of the home responded with a firearm. Those findings were later submitted to District Attorney Jody Pickens for legal review. Tyeasha's family strongly disagreed with that conclusion. Her mother, Tara Harris, publicly questioned both the investigative process and the sheriff's office's interpretation of the evidence. Family members maintained that important witness testimony had not been given sufficient weight and continued calling for additional review. The two women who accompanied Tyeasha to the residence, Ariana and Nadia, also gave public interviews describing the encounter differently from the sheriff's office's summary. Their statements became a major reason the case attracted widespread attention. For many members of the public, two very different versions of the same event now existed. One reflected the conclusions reached by investigators. The other reflected the accounts given by Tyeasha's family and the eyewitnesses who were with her that day. Reconciling those competing narratives became one of the most difficult aspects of understanding the case. Ultimately, however, public opinion was not what determined the legal outcome. The deciding question was whether the available evidence met the legal standard required for criminal prosecution. After reviewing the investigative file submitted by detectives, District Attorney Jody Pickens announced that the evidence did not support filing criminal charges under Tennessee law. As a result, no arrest was made, no criminal trial took place, and no verdict or sentence followed. Officials emphasized that the decision was based on the evidence presented during the investigation and the legal standards required under Tennessee law, not on public reaction or media attention. For Tyeasha's family, however, the prosecutor's decision did not bring the questions to an end. If anything, it deepened them. Although the legal review had concluded, the debate surrounding what happened outside the Curry residence continued. For many observers, the case had reached one conclusion in the courtroom, but an entirely different one in the court of public opinion. As of the latest publicly available official information, the legal status of this case has not changed. District Attorney Jody Pickens determined that the evidence presented during the investigation did not support filing criminal charges under Tennessee law, and no subsequent public announcement has indicated that the case has been reopened or that additional charges have been filed. For the legal system, that decision marked the conclusion of the case. For Tyeasha's family, it did not. Her parents, Tara Harris and Philip Starks, have continued speaking publicly about their daughter's death, calling for accountability, and encouraging the community to keep asking questions about the circumstances surrounding what happened that day. Community advocates and supporters have also organized gatherings and public discussions to ensure that Tyeasha's name and her story are not forgotten. The reason this case continues to resonate extends beyond its legal outcome. It raises difficult questions about informal custody arrangements, conflicting eyewitness testimony, split-second decisions, and the challenge investigators face when different interpretations emerge from the same event. Although the legal process reached its conclusion, the broader public conversation never truly ended. Even today, people continue to debate whether every available fact has been fully understood. For investigators, the prosecutor's decision closed the legal review. For Tyeasha's loved ones, however, the search for answers continues. Cases like this serve as a reminder that the end of a legal proceeding does not always bring emotional closure. Sometimes the official record closes while the questions left behind continue to affect families and communities for years. That is why this case remains one of the most widely discussed homicide investigations in West Tennessee years after it first made headlines. More than 3 years have passed since Tyeasha Kataria Starks lost her life during what was expected to be a routine custody exchange. The investigation reached its legal conclusion. The evidence was reviewed. A decision was made. Yet for many people, the questions have never completely disappeared. Cases like this remind us that a legal conclusion and public acceptance are not always the same thing. Investigators must determine whether the available evidence satisfies the legal standard required to bring criminal charges. Families, however, often measure justice differently. For those who loved Tyeasha, the pain of losing a daughter, a mother, and a sister did not end when the investigation concluded. For others who have followed this case, the differing witness accounts continue to raise difficult questions about exactly what happened during those final moments outside the Curry residence. Those questions may never be answered to everyone's satisfaction. What remains beyond dispute is that a young woman lost her life, a little boy lost his mother, and 2 families were forever changed by the events of the 20th of February 2023. Whether viewed through the lens of the law, personal loss, or public discussion, this case continues to serve as a reminder of how quickly ordinary disagreements can escalate into irreversible consequences. It also highlights the importance of careful investigations, objective evidence, and a legal system tasked with weighing facts rather than emotion. Even after years have passed, the story of Tyeasha Kataria Starks continues to be remembered, not only because of how it ended, but because of the difficult questions it continues to leave behind. As with every case we examine on Darkness Protocol, our goal is not to decide guilt or innocence. It is to present the available facts as accurately and fairly as possible, while remembering the real people whose lives were changed forever. If you found this documentary informative, consider subscribing to Darkness Protocol for more carefully researched true crime stories. Your support helps us continue producing fact-based documentaries that explore complex cases with accuracy, balance, and respect. If this case left you with questions or thoughts, we invite you to share them respectfully in the comments below. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next case.